You are listening to the Sports Corner on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair, your favorite baseball, football, and Montclair State University athletic show. I'm your host, Sebastian Stratton, joined alongside my always amazing co-host, Mr. Nick Suppa. Nick, we have a lot to talk about. We are a week through MLB spring training, some NFL free agency news, and some Montclair State University athletics. But before we get into all of that, how are you doing today?
Always a pleasure to be here, Sebastian. Can never start my Thursday off any better than being here on the Sports Corner. And, Sebastian, we had ourselves a phenomenal week. You want to know why? Well, guess what? The Montclair State Red Hawks basketball women's and men's team have made it to the NJAC championship. And rumor has it, Sebastian, that you were actually at one of those games. Am I correct?
I was at one of those games. I was on panel doing the board for Tuesday's game for the NJAC semifinals where Montclair State University took on TCNJ. And Nick, let me tell you, what a great game it was. Montclair defeated TCNJ 80-62. And it was a lot of what we've seen because I know you've been on panel a bunch for the men's game. And it was awesome. On fire. That's the word I'm going to use to describe Jacob Morales. He was unbelievable. 30 points, 12 for 13 from the field, 5 for 6 from 3. When he gets clicking, Nick, I was watching the live broadcast on the Red Hawk Sports Network YouTube. He wasn't missing a single shot. It was unbelievable. He was on fire, making everything, really playing well with cohesion. Really awesome. But Nick, I also heard a rumor that you were on the women's game. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Well, Sebastian, that is correct. I was. Last night was an incredible matchup as Montclair State Red Hawks women's basketball team took on the William Patterson Pioneers. And it started off a little slow, a couple of turnovers from both teams, so it was a bit of a sloppy game at first. But in the end, it turned out to be a great victory. Both teams played their hearts out. And in the end, Montclair State won by a score of 67-55, a 12-point victory. And what has really been an amazing asset to this team has been recently named NJAC Rookie of the Year, Alyssa Craigwell. And my God, did she have a phenomenal game. She finished last night with 27 points, 11 for 20 from the field, and 4 for 7 from the free throw line. Excuse me. And Olivia Vero, senior, it could potentially be her final year as a Montclair State Red Hawk, and she had finished with 17 points, 8 for 17 from the field, 1 for 2 from the free throw line, and 14 rebounds. I also forgot to mention Alyssa Craigwell had 10 rebounds. So both of them had a double-double last night. Fantastic game. They will now play the TCNJ Lions, the number 1 seed of the NJAC final. And that will be this Saturday. Unsure of what time it will be, but it should be a great matchup. And what's also amazing is this stat. Ready for this, Sebastian?
I'm ready.
Montclair State women's and men's basketball team are both in the finals at the same time for this year. Last time this happened, 30 years ago, 1995, when both the men's and the women's team for Montclair State made it to the NJAC final. The women's team did win that year. They defeated Rutgers Camden 74-52. Unfortunately, the men's team fell short that year to Jersey City State 67-50. So even though both teams made it that year, we still have not had a year yet where they both won. So Sebastian, do you think this could be the year where both the men's and the women's basketball team wins it for Montclair State?
No doubt. Both teams have so many good players, and I think that's a credit to the product that men's head coach Justin Potts and women's head coach Karen Harvey has put out there. They play so well, and we see that when they turn the ball over from both sides. They bounce back, play well, because sometimes you have to do that. It's not always play in transition, take poor shots. Sometimes you need to slow it down, use the shot clock, and play well. But Nick, one question I have to ask for you, because we know that there's so many good players and diverse players on this Montclair team that can do a plethora of things well. But who is one player that you would say isn't the star such as an Alyssa Craigwell, but does the little things where if she didn't do these things, Montclair wouldn't play well in their totality?
Definitely have to say Sophie Benaventine. I mean, she has been a huge piece to the puzzle for this Redhawks team, especially her passing. I gotta give her credit. She's one of the best passers I've ever seen for this team. She makes plays happen. She is great at dribbling the ball, and when she gets an opening, she can make a shot for sure. And last night, she didn't get a huge amount of points. She only had 4 points, but she still had 5 rebounds and 6 assists. So right there tells you that she's great. She did pretty well with the passing. She had the most assists in the game, and she had 5 rebounds, which of course wasn't the most in the game, but still was a huge impact for this team, and I think she's going to continue that going into the finals this Saturday.
100%. And Nick, the reason I ask you about that key factor that isn't always because we know that when you watch basketball, in sports in general, the box score doesn't always tell the whole story. And the reason I say that is because I like to compare Sophie Benaventine to someone on the men's team, and that is Kieran Flanagan, who is going to be a key for this Redhawks team. And let me tell you, he doesn't always score. He can score. A lot of the scoring goes to Jacob Morales and Mike Jackson. But this is someone who is averaging 8 assists in Montclair's last 5 games, which includes 10 assists in their semifinal matchup versus TCNJ. This man is a jack of all trades. He does a little bit of everything, plays so well, plays tough. The graduate student coming into his final games as a Redhawk, he really, if he can score to go around, because we know they have other players, Cabrian Goss, Quantavious Rogers, Miles Primus, to go along with Jacob Morales and Mike Jackson. I like to call him a Mike and Ike, Mario and Luigi duo. When they play well together and you have this extra element, it really adds so much continuity. So I'm looking forward to both games. We are going to have coverage here live on the radio station. I hope both teams bring home an NJAC championship. They both definitely have the capability to do so. So good luck to the Redhawks. And with that being said, we are going to get on the Montclair Path train and travel about 12 miles to New York City. Because, Nick, there's some Major League Baseball news that we have to talk about, specifically with the New York Yankees. And I remember messaging you on Instagram last week, Nick, because when this rule changed, we actually talked about it the day before.
Yes. What's so ironic, Sebastian, is, as you mentioned last week, we brought up there were rumors that the Yankees were potentially going to change their rule where players are allowed to have facial hair now. And guess what? The very next day, I get a message from you on Instagram, and it is a picture of a policy note from the Yankees owner, Hal Steinbrenner himself. The Yankees have officially announced they will now be changing their policy where players are allowed now to have beards when playing in the regular season. And I thought I was seeing things for a second there. I thought to myself, there's no way this isn't real. It can't be, because this is a rule that has been going on now for almost 50 years, since George Steinbrenner made this rule in 1976. And it is true. It is a fact. The Yankees are now officially allowing their players to have well-groomed beards, and this was said from Hal Steinbrenner last Friday. But again, well-groomed beards can't be super long, and they also said, as far as hair goes, it still has to be on the shorter side, short hair, but they are now allowing players to have their beards. And there's also another rule that they changed not too long after that. Would you like to explain this one, Sebastian?
Absolutely. And that rule is, A little bit. It's a different spin. The New York Yankees will no longer be playing New York, New York by Frank Sinatra after home losses. Instead, there will be a skew of alternating songs. This one's very interesting to me. But before we get into our thoughts on that, Nick, going back to that facial hair rule, this is something that's been going on for almost 5 decades, 49 years before it was changed by Hal Steinbrenner. I never thought he would necessarily get rid of it completely, and he didn't. All he did was alter it. But this is something because George Steinbrenner, he was in the Air Force, and his thought process was he probably had to shave in the Air Force. If my guys are looking good and they're well groomed and they don't have facial hair, look good, play good. That's the saying that goes around. So this is something that when Hal was asked, what would your father think of this move? Because George Steinbrenner passed away in 2010. His thoughts were, well, if this is going to stop us from getting a premier player, I think my dad would love it because all my dad wanted to do was win. I mean, safe to say he wasn't around for all 27 World Series titles.
Yep.
But this is a guy that won, so I think it's the right move, especially when you have players such as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's changed his stance on whether he's wanted to come to the Yankees or not. Money talks. I think the world runs on money, Nick, because if someone's throwing out $30 million at you, you're going to take it. So yeah. I think this was expected. My thing, though, I'm very curious. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Let me hear it.
Which players are actually going to grow out their beards? Because Yankees captain Aaron Judge has said he's going to remain clean-shaven. But if there's a player that you would like to see grow out a beard, who would it be?
Well, first of all, shout out to Aaron Judge. I truly appreciate that he wants to keep the tradition going. And he also mentioned something about if you don't want to come to the Yankees because of a beard policy, then why even bother playing in the MLB or even bother playing for the Yankees? He said something along the lines of that. But again, Aaron Judge, as Sebastian said, he will not be growing his beard out. He will be keeping the tradition alive. Somebody who I would want to see grow out a beard, it's hard to say because you get used to all these players on the Yankees who don't have a beard. You know? So it's hard to pick one player in particular who I would want to see have a beard because players like Anthony Rizzo, who's still a free agent right now, when his time with the Yankees and even with the Cubs, he never had a beard. He was always clean shaven. Giancarlo Stanton, when his time during the Miami Marlins. And now with the Yankees, he was always clean-shaven. So all these star players that the Yankees have, even when they had Juan Soto last year, all the other teams he played for never had a beard. Always clean-shaved. So it's hard to say. I know that their new closer, Devin Williams, he had a beard when he was with the Milwaukee Brewers, and he wanted to keep his beard when he was on the Yankees. That was right before they actually changed the policy. So I think he definitely has a nice, well-groomed beard when he was with the Brewers. So I wouldn't mind seeing what he looks like in a Yankee uniform with the beard growing out.
No doubt. If I were to put a guess, I wouldn't say that more than half of players grow a beard. I think definitely Devin Williams is going to grow out a beard. He's actually the one. I'm not saying he's the one that changed Hal Steinbrenner's mind and was the one that decided to change the rule, but he actually went to Brian Cashman, Yankees general manager, and said that I'm a little bit upset because this is a 1-year contract and I want to have facial hair because, not to say he didn't look good with facial hair because he just didn't like the way he looked. This is something he's had throughout his entire tenure with the Brewers, so it's going to be very interesting. For the first time in 49 years, the Yankees will no longer have their players clean-shaven. You're allowed to grow a beard. And just to touch up on George Steinbrenner, he was so on to the rule that I remember listening to a post-game interview with Derek Jeter. He said there would be players. George Steinbrenner would be hiding in the Yankees clubhouse, and he would call players in between innings, hand them a Gillette razor, a safety razor, and have them shave in between innings because their facial hair was getting too long. Because we knew that Mr. Steinbrenner was by the books. His son is too as well, Hal, not as strict, because either way, I don't think George would have changed this rule because, as Judge put it, it's a privilege to play for the Yankees. So it's going to be very interesting But Nick, let me get your thoughts on New York, New York, because this has been a staple since 1980, actually. It's win or loss. I mean, walking back to the car in the parking lot. This is a song you're going to hear no longer.
This has been a tradition for many years for the New York Yankees. At Yankee Stadium, win or lose, they always played this song, New York, New York, by Frank Sinatra. And we'll still hear it, but only now after they win. And it's definitely going to be an interesting change of events because that's been something going on for years now. And even if they win or lose, they still played it because no matter what, they're still New York. They're still the Yankees, and that's why they always played that song. But now it's going to be interesting because I don't know what songs will be played now. I would assume it will be songs in terms of victory and New York. So who knows? We'll see what they can do because, again, this is another tradition for the Yankees that is now being tampered with and changed around, and we'll be seeing this next year. I mean, Sebastian, what do you think? Do you think that this is something that they should have kept, since this is another tradition that has been going on for a very long time for the Yankees?
I mean, I understand it. I know that fans have expressed their displeasure with having to play kind of a happy song because that's the point of Frank Sinatra, New York, New York. You're thinking about New York, but after a victory, you really can't indulge in the song. So I'm indifferent to it. I mean, I understand it. I don't think it's the biggest change. I think the facial hair policy is more of a big deal. So
oh, yeah.
I'm curious if and when I go to a few Yankee games this year. I hope they don't lose, but I'm just curious. Hopefully I'm able to hear the songs if they lose on Instagram because I'm curious. It's going to be a rotation. I'm pretty sure that, I don't know if it's a player that's going to have a say. I'm sure it's Aaron Judge. I mean, I know that he doesn't want to lose. He always wants to win. So I'm very curious to hear his thoughts. But I'm sure Hal Steinbrenner is going to be the one making the playlist. So I'm very curious. And Nick, we talk about the Yankees. I think now it's the perfect time to talk about a team that is very, very hated. But not the team in particular, a player, Jose Altuve, the second baseman for the Houston Astros. And I am actually going to put a little bit of an emphasis on second base because, Nick, I don't know if we can call him that. There's a little bit of a dilemma going on in Houston.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot going on with the Houston Astros, and this one in particular is definitely going to be an oddball as Jose Altuve, 34 years old, who played second base his entire career, is now being transitioned over into left field this year, and he hasn't started anywhere else besides his second base primary position in his entire 14-year MLB career. That's where he was when he won his 2 World Series championships with the Astros, that huge run of 6 or 7 straight years where they made it to at least the American League Championship Series. So he's known nothing else but that. Even last season, this just goes to show you how much of a stud he's been. And as much as I can't stand to say it, because as Yankee fans, nobody really likes Altuve, obviously, but 5 errors last season, and that just goes how unbelievable he has been at second base. So it's going to be really, really interesting, and we'll talk about this at some point, but on top of that happening, now they just lost Alex Bregman to the Boston Red Sox, who are massive rivals with the Yankees in that American League East division. He's going to be and we've talked about that before with how now they have Rafael Devers and Alex Bregman fighting for third base, so which Alex Bregman is all for playing anywhere for the Red Sox, but a little more of a struggle with Devers, so that's still being figured out. But for Altuve, it's definitely going to be a weird transition for the Houston Astros organization to see this for the Astros fans and, of course, Jose Altuve himself.
No doubt, and the reason I'm so perplexed about this is because they have their lineup filled already, because looking at the lineup, the infielders in particular, let's say Jose Altuve were to play second base. You have Jose Altuve at second, Isaac Paredes from the Rays, who's very versatile. I could see him getting moved over to second base. Christian Walker is a first baseman. He's not playing anywhere else. That's where he played with the Diamondbacks. And then shortstop, Jeremy Pena, World Series MVP, Jeremy Pena. So I'm very perplexed because if you move him to left field and you have a guy such as Mauricio Dubon, the super utility man who's projected to play on the bench, if you move him to second base, then you have no choice but to put Isaac Paredes at third, and then there's a little bit of a dilemma because you really can't fit everyone. I am going to assume the reason behind this is because I'm very high on Mauricio Dubon. I've seen him play. He's a guy, he has speed, he hits extra base hits. He's not necessarily a home run hitter, but you don't need that when you have Yordan Alvarez smacking 30 home runs every season. So I understand it a little bit. It's going to be very interesting because, as you said, 4 errors last year. This is someone, and at second base in the MLB, you need arm strength, obviously, but you don't have to have the strongest arm. And I've watched highlight reels on YouTube where Altuve has made unbelievable diving catches. He plays well. He plays smooth in transition. So this is definitely going to be very interesting because it's not easy to change positions going from infield to outfield. Not just that. When Carlos Beltran played for the Yankees, he had to switch from right field to left field. And when talking with reporters on Carlos, how difficult was this transition moving from right field to left field? He said it was one of the most difficult transitions in Major League Baseball in my life. And that's crazy because you're catching a fly ball, but it just goes to show from slicing balls in right field to curling balls in left, it really has a difference between where you position, how you see the ball coming to you, and it takes practice and a lot of repetitions. So I'm sure if the Astros see something where Altuve isn't playing well at second base, where we are not going to see that. So it is going to be very interesting. And going back to the subject of the Yankees now, not just the Yankees, Nick, the American League East, one of the most compelling and interesting divisions that is going to come down to the wire because there are a lot of good teams with a lot of good players. Nick, why don't you just give the listeners a little bit of a rundown of how 2024 went?
What a great year it was for 2024 baseball in the American League East. And for the most part, these teams were high competitors. And as we remember, the Yankees clinched the division last year. They were 94-68. They finished 3 games over one of their bigger rivals in the division, the Baltimore Orioles, who finished 91-71, and they had made it to the playoffs, but they just fell short. They got swept in the wild card round, 2-0, and then after them, the Red Sox finished in third base. Of course, the biggest arch rivals of the New York Yankees. They finished at a perfectly even 500 record at 81-81. They did not make the playoffs, but they did make it competitive at the end. They were fighting for a spot in the playoffs, but in the end, it did not happen. Followed by the Tampa Bay Rays, who in the more recent years had been pretty competitive. They've been a great team, but unfortunately this year they finished 2 games under 500, eliminated from the playoffs, eliminated from making the playoffs, and they finished 80-82, so not the best year for the Rays and their manager Kevin Cash, who is a 2-time manager of the year. And then, last but not least, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, who finished in last place, and they've had their up and down years. Unfortunately, this was a down year for them. They finished 74-88, so they finished 14 games under 500, so definitely a struggling year for the Blue Jays. And now they have a pretty studded lineup. I'd say they had a pretty good lineup too last year, but unfortunately things just didn't work out the way they had planned. So we'll see how competitive they will be going into the 2025 season.
100%. It's going to be very interesting how this shapes up. But Nick, before we go to a quick break, let's think about, we won't do the entire American League East, let's do the top 3 teams from last season, which were the Yankees, Red Sox, and Orioles. And we can go back and forth here and highlight an X factor from each team where this isn't necessarily the biggest star player, but if this player does not well going into this season, it's going to be very difficult for that team to win. I'll let you start off with the Yankees.
Well, thank you very much, young sir. So the Yankees, obviously, they have a good team. I mean, we saw they went to the World Series. It was an unfortunate finish, but now they added stars like Cody Bellinger and 37-year-old first baseman Paul Goldschmidt, who has had phenomenal stats in his early days, even in his recent years. As far as who I think needs to have a big impact on this team, which I think he definitely will, is Cody Bellinger, because this guy has been phenomenal. He was great with the Dodgers, and his time with the Cubs, we heard some pretty good stats about him from last year, but it wasn't his best year. So I think that this is going to be a big year for him. He's in the Bronx. He's playing for the team that he grew up with and loved playing for. His dad played for the Yankees. So I think he's going to have a major impact for this Yankees team.
And the cool thing about Cody Bellinger, you mentioned his dad, Clay Bellinger, who was a left fielder for the Yankees and a 2-time World Series champion. So cool to see the family history. But my X factor for the Yankees is Paul Goldschmidt. 37-year-old coming off a career-worst season where he hit .235. The home run metrics were down. The extra bases hits in general were down. Each passing day, it looks more and more likely that designated hitter Giancarlo Stanton, former MVP Giancarlo Stanton, is not going to play with tendonitis in both of his elbows. With that being said, it looks like Paul Goldschmidt would be inserted into that 4-hole in the lineup, a spot where you're hitting right behind Cody Bellinger and Aaron Judge, and you're also hitting ahead of Austin Wells and Anthony Volpe to set the table for the bottom half of the lineup. So I think that if the Yankees are going to have success, especially without Stanton, Paul Goldschmidt is someone that has to play well, and he has to do it right away off the bat, because you don't want to fall down too quickly in the standings right away. We all know in a 162-game season, you have time to rebound, but I think it's better if you get off to a good start. So that were our Yankees X factors, and now shifting over to the Baltimore Orioles. Nick, I'm very disappointed with the Orioles this offseason. Just coming from an MLB fan in general, they didn't do much in terms of going out there and getting big acquisitions. And that's why my X factor for the Orioles is right-handed pitcher Zach Eflin. This is a man who is going to be the ace of the staff. The only rotation move that they made is they went out and got the Japanese 35-year-old rookie. Yes, that's correct. The 35-year-old rookie.
What?
In Tomoyuki Sugano from Japan, who was a stud, 1.19 ERA. He was very good. But Zach Eflin is a guy who played for the Phillies. He is going to have to be that ace in a division where there are a lot of good pitchers, Nick. You have Garrett Cole on the Yankees, Garrett Crochet, the 6'6" lefty on the Red Sox now, who throws upwards of 95 miles an hour. So that is my X factor for the Orioles, Zach Eflin. We know the lineup is there for the Orioles. You have that trio of Gunnar Henderson, Ryan Mountcastle, Adley Rutschman. So it's going to be very, very interesting. So that's why you need an ace in the MLB. If you make the playoffs and you get to Game 1, you need a guy who you know he's going to go out there, give you 5+ innings, and pitch his heart out. So, Nick, I'll reiterate that question back to you. Who is your X factor for the Orioles?
Well, as far as pitching, it's going to be very interesting because now they have Charlie Morton on the pitching staff now, which is pretty unbelievable. And he's had some great stats in the years, and not to mention he's a World Series champion as well, so he has experience in that area, and he has that knowledge that he can pass on to the younger pitchers as well. So I think he's going to be an X factor for the Orioles pitching staff. As far as hitters, we obviously saw a lot of young we see a lot of young talent in this team, like Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, and one guy that I would like to see come out in this one is Jackson Holliday. I mean, I loved what this guy... I mean, this guy didn't put up the biggest numbers last year. He only had 5 home runs, 23 RBIs, and 36 hits, and a 189 batting average in 2024. But I think he has potential. I think he could definitely have some kind of impact. Not to mention, he's only 21 years old, so he's a young one. He's a youngling, as they say in Star Wars. So I would love to see what this guy could do.
I agree, and the thing with Holliday, he made his debut at a very young age, 19 or 20 years old, I believe. So this is someone as a former first overall pick, where his dad, we talk about that family tie, Matt Holliday, who actually played in the MLB for about a decade, played with the Yankees. There was a lot of pressure on the young kid. So this is someone who's playing with grown men, 25 to 30 years old. He's someone that doesn't have to do all the damage. You have Adley Rutschman. You have Gunnar Henderson. You have Jordan Westberg. So he just has to be someone, just don't hit terribly. Don't hit 190. Hit in the low 200s even, just to get that confidence up. But the last team I want to mention is the Boston Red Sox. Nick, I think this team, I don't know if they're better than the Yankees, but I think they are the biggest threat to the Yankees. And that's why my X factor, because this lineup is very, very good. They don't really have a clear weakness. So I am going to go to the bullpen. I'm actually going to go with 2 players, a bullpen tandem, setup and closer, Liam Hendricks and Aroldis Chapman. Nick, I know that name rings a bell, Aroldis Chapman.
Unfortunately, it does.
Because this is someone that pitched for the Yankees multiple years, kind of similar to new Mets starting pitcher Clay Holmes in terms of he had the fastest pitch ever on record. Rumors say that Nolan Ryan threw it faster, up to 110. I don't believe that. So Aroldis Chapman threw a fastball at 106 miles an hour. So, and that's combined with him and Liam Hendricks. Liam is 36. Chapman is 37. These are the setup guys. A lot of games in the MLB, if you want to compete for a championship, you have to win them close. Are these two going to be the ones? Liam Hendricks, he's going to have to pitch some big innings against the Yankees, and statistically, he struggled against the Yankees in his career with a 5+ ERA. Both of these guys throw upwards of 95 miles an hour. So I am very curious if they can be locked down and shut down those 8 and 9 innings, such as a Devin Williams and Luke Weaver for the Yankees, as an example, they are going to be very dominant. So I am looking forward to this tandem. I hope they play really poorly and Giancarlo Stanton smacks a home run over the Green Monster in Fenway Park. So Nick, nonetheless, going to be interesting. Who's your X factor for the Red Sox?
I think one player in particular who has everybody wondering how he's going to fit into this Red Sox system, including myself, Alex Bregman. As we mentioned before, he has been one of their newest additions to this Red Sox team, by far the biggest addition that they added to this roster after making a deal to get him from the Houston Astros. And it's going to be really, really interesting because, as we mentioned, they already have a set third baseman in Rafael Devers. So no matter what's going to happen, whether Alex Bregman is going to be starting at third, which is going to be very unlikely because, according to Devers, he is unwilling to give up his third base primary position. And according to Bregman, to him, it doesn't matter wherever I'm playing on the defensive side of things. I just want to play, I want to win, and I want to go out there for the title. And so wherever he plays, I think it'll definitely work out for him. And we already know that he has a phenomenal bat, and you definitely can't take that away from him. So I think he's definitely going to be a huge factor to the Boston Red Sox this year.
I agree 100%. Going to be very interesting. The American League East in general. We are going to take a quick break here on the Sports Corner. You are listening to everyone's favorite baseball, football, and Montclair State University athletic show on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. Don't go anywhere just yet. We will be right back. We are back. You are listening to the Sports Corner on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. I'm Sebastian Stratton, joined alongside my co-host Nick Suppa. Nick, it is time for some NFL talk. I'll let you take this one away.
Well, obviously, there has been a lot going on in the NFL, and obviously, we're going to start this one off with some changes that have been going on to the NFL, including Roger Goodell, who has been contemplating adding a 18th game to the NFL schedule. We will also be bringing up people who have been in talks of trying to ban the tush push of the Eagles, as well as some talks of Matthew Stafford, who has been allowed by the Rams to seek a trade to go somewhere else where we have no idea. But first, we're going to be talking about NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who has flirted with the idea of adding an 18th game to the NFL schedule.
I do not agree with this whatsoever. This makes zero sense. Nick, I loved it when it was just 16 games.
Yeah.
Football takes a toll on your body, and I understand that they have experimented with the Guardian cap to protect players from getting concussions, but still, it's very tolling on your body. And to play an 18th game where you only get one bye week, because Goodell isn't sure if he would add a second bye week, which is the only way I would be okay with this happening, is the second bye week. So I'd assume it would start a week earlier, maybe even late August, first week of the NFL season, Thursday Night Football, early September. But Nick, I would have loved this back in high school. Then the reason for this is because if this were to happen, it would be set up where there would be 2 bye weeks, 18-game schedule. The Super Bowl would take place on President's Day weekend. So congratulations, elementary school.
Woo!
High school, you would have no school the day after. But in college, it doesn't really affect us too much unless you have class on Monday. So I don't agree with that. What are your thoughts on this, Nick?
It's too many changes that's been going on in the NFL, obviously. And as you mentioned, I was always so used to, for years, the NFL having 16 games and an extra week for teams to have the bye week. And then up until a couple years ago, they added a 17th game for 18 weeks. Now, after like 2 or 3 seasons, they're already talking about adding an 18th game, 19 weeks of football. And like you said, Sebastian, these players, it's too much. It's a huge toll on their bodies, going week after week of helmet to helmet play action, where it can cause them brain damage eventually, and also other injuries as well, not just in the brain, but just in general. And it's a lot for them. So I don't know why they are already talking about adding an extra week. I think it should stay where it is now. I think they shouldn't have even added this extra week, but they should not be adding any more games than what they have right now.
Unequivocally, Nick, I'll give you an answer to your question. Money. One word, money.
Yep.
It's all about revenue and having these players play on big market Sunday Night Football on NBC, Fox Sports, CBS. We even saw this year Amazon Prime featured our team on there, the Steelers and the Ravens, in the wild card matchup. The only way you get to view Amazon Prime is if you have a subscription to their content. So we're getting away from turning on the TV, turning on Channel 2 and listening to Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. A lot of it is going away, and we're seeing this. Peacock TV last year, the Chiefs played the Dolphins on Wild Card Weekend. So I'm very curious. I think eventually they are going to add it. I would say maybe next year, 2026 season, 2027. I don't agree with it at all. But there's also something that both of us do not agree with. Nick, take it away.
Well, obviously, this first NFL news story, we came to agreement on this. And this one, you guys will, I would say 99% of you will also agree with us on this one. But the Green Bay Packers have submitted a proposal to the National Football League officials to actually ban this year's Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl champions' famous tush push move. What? timeout for a second. It's a move. What do you want to ban it for? It's not their fault that you can't figure out that strategy. They just seem to have it all figured out, and it works for them almost every single time. We even saw it in the Super Bowl. Every time that they used this move, it worked. And for most of the times that they use this move, it's when they're 1 yard short of the first down, 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, and guess what? They almost always get it. It never fails on them. So seeing this just shocked me to the very core. I don't know why a team would actually think of sending in a proposal to ban a move that works for a team. It's like somebody has something to say about everything, even for the Super Bowl champions. And it's amazing, too, because nobody wanted the Chiefs to win. They got what they wanted, and they still complain about the team that won the Super Bowl, which is unbelievable.
Here's my thing. Everybody loves to blame Jalen Hurts and say, oh, he's not a great quarterback, that he's in a system. First of all, that's a credit to Eagles general manager Howie Roseman for the product that he's put out on the field. And how about this? If you don't like that they run the tush push, stop them.
Yeah.
Don't let them get to 1st and goal on the goal line.
It's as simple as that.
How about you draft better, focus on your own team, and don't care about what someone else is saying? Because the thing is, you can't say it's an Eagles play because Eagles center and former center and future Hall of Famer Jason Kelce, he retired. They put in Cam Jurgens in there. The play works just as well.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, this is a play where Jalen Hurts is lined up. It's usually a tight end. For the Eagles, it was Dallas Goedert. It was Grant Calcaterra when Goddard was hurt, and Saquon Barkley, and they would push behind. Maybe you need a better O-line. Maybe you need better coaching. So Sean McDermott from the Bills, I don't think he should be worrying about that. He should be worrying about trying to stop the Chiefs because he's 0-4 against them in the playoffs. Because Josh Allen, he could run this effectively. They just couldn't. It's credit to the Eagles coaching staff, offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, head coach Nick Sirianni, because Josh Allen, standing at 6'4", 230 pounds, he's unable to do it effectively. So I really don't understand it. I think that team should focus on themselves, maybe try and stop it. Or how about this? Make your team better and watch the Eagles film so that you can run the play yourself, because the Eagles are going to keep doing it. It's a football play. If you ban that play, why not just ban tackling in general? Because that's what it is. And we saw the best was Frankie Louvu, who we highlighted a few weeks ago in our NFC Championship preview. He actually jumped over the top of Eagles center Cam Jurgens and tried to stop the play. And then the referee came out and said, if this happens again and you keep getting these penalties at the half-yard line, we can't keep moving the ball inch by inch.
And then they basically give them the touchdown at that point.
That was so crazy.
I've never seen that. I don't think anyone's ever seen that. By far the most bizarre play I've ever seen in the NFL playoffs.
I agree. I've never seen it before. I didn't even know that could happen. And then fans are out there saying, oh, you know, Phillies, thought about baseball for a second. Eagles fans, that they get everything they want, but they don't. So it's going to be very interesting. I really hope they don't ban it. You hear me talking, you might think I'm an Eagles fan, but it's just because it's a football play. There's nothing illegal about it. Maybe teams need to get better coaching, and that's a credit to the Eagles in general and the product that Jeffrey Lurie, Eagles owner, and then back down to general manager Howie Roseman, and it all starts with head coach Nick Sirianni. So credit to them. And we talk about quarterback Jalen Hurts. We have another quarterback to talk about that they actually faced in the divisional round and almost came out on top. 37-year-old Matthew Stafford, Super Bowl champion Matthew Stafford. Nick, what's the news that just came out about Mr. Stafford?
Well, from not too long ago, it was a couple weeks ago, I want to say, the Los Angeles Rams, who, as Sebastian said, they made it to the playoffs this year. They unfortunately fell a couple rounds short of making it to the ultimate goal, Super Bowl champions. They lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. And then not too long after that, the Los Angeles Rams have actually allowed their starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, to seek a trade. Now, there have been multiple teams in talks with the Rams of trying to trade for Matthew Stafford, but Matthew Stafford himself has requested that he wants a total of $50 million a year. And Sebastian, we know multiple teams that have been in talks about getting Matthew Stafford, including our very own Pittsburgh Steelers. But there have been other teams as well. All around in general, how do you think this is going to turn out, and where do you think Matthew Stafford is going to be in the 2025 season?
Well, first of all, I think it shows Rams head coach Sean McVay his mindset, because he went out there publicly and said he is very comfortable with having quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo take the helm at quarterback. So I think this shows most teams don't want to give a 37-year-old quarterback who's only going to keep declining. Unless you're Tom Brady, you can't play forever. So it's a very difficult situation. But if there's one spot that I'm thinking of, it's actually not the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that the Steelers need to get a little bit younger. They need to they need to get a full rebuild, because it just seems they are stuck in this mediocrity where they're going 9-8 or 10-7 every year and getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs. And then Mike Tomlin is being praised as this higher up figure, even though he hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years. And I love Mike Tomlin, but you have to change in the NFL because the game is only growing and technology has been a factor and coaches are getting younger. So with that being said, I have Matthew Stafford as a fit for the New York Giants. I think he would be very well coming over. Maybe we can get him on the show. If he gets traded to the Giants, we can get him over here. So, yeah, and the reason behind this is Stafford, 37 years old, the Giants are not in win-now mode. They have to go through a rebuild, and I'm not saying it has to be a full-force effect where they have to tear everything down, but let's take a look at the Giants picture overall in its entirety. Third overall pick, I am going to say if Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is on the board, depending on what the Titans and the Browns do, they are going to take a quarterback. Now, I don't care how good they were in college, they are not going to be better than Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts. The Eagles aren't going anywhere. Looking at their roster, they have 2 key free agents, and they have the cap space to sign them in Zach Bond and Mekhi Becton. So it looks like the Eagles aren't going anywhere. So the Giants, you have a veteran in Stafford, and you have a rookie sit behind him, because the expectation for fans around the league is that these rookies are going to come in there and provide that spark right away, and that's unrealistic. Take Patrick Mahomes, for example, Nick, 3-time Super Bowl champion. What did he do his rookie year? He sat behind Alex Smith. He didn't play at all. He played in blowouts, and then that next year, he finally had that happen, and he played well. So it goes to show a rookie doesn't have to go in there and play well right away, because it's unrealistic, especially in a division such as the NFC East, where these teams are really, really good. We don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. I didn't even mention them. I think Jerry Jones is in his own world there. So it's going to be very interesting. But staying on the topic of the Giants, Nick, how about a man that has been in New Jersey the past year and doesn't want to leave?
It's funny that you mentioned that, Sebastian. I was going to ask you the same question, because apparently New York Jets starting quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who have officially stated that they will be parting ways with him, Rodgers has reached out to the New York Giants, who we have just been talking about with Matthew Stafford, and Rodgers has reached out to them to gauge their potential interest in signing him. How long the contract will be, we don't know. There have been no talks of how much money he's looking to get. I think at this point he wants to remain in the league. So as far as money, I don't think he really cares how much he receives. But there have been talks that Aaron Rodgers has reached out to the New York Giants, and it's now a question of will he remain in the state of New Jersey.
Well, I think this says a few things about Rodgers, and we talked about him a little bit last week. First of all, you rarely see free agents reach out to teams. It's usually the other way around, where teams are reaching out to free agents. So I think this says that Rodgers still wants to play football, first of all. He doesn't want to leave New Jersey. I guess he loved it here. He didn't like the cold in Green Bay. And he said that on the Pat McAfee show, a weekly show where he's appeared multiple times. He said, I just redid my house. Now they're kicking me out. Rodgers actually went to the Jets head coach, Aaron Glenn, and said, can you give me another year? I'll help mentor a quarterback. I want to stay. I still have some juice left. Aaron Glenn said no, and I understand that. I understand both perspectives. He wants to go in another direction, so Rodgers is going to go in another direction. But speaking about the Giants, I hate this move. This isn't a move where the Steelers are in win now mode. The Steelers have the players around them. They have the defense. If they shore up the O-line, Rodgers can go in there and provide a spark. The only playmakers that the Giants have really that are consistent are Malik Neighbors, wide receiver, and running back Tyrone Tracy. And that Giants O-line, the interior specifically, you have Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas playing the tackle positions. That interior has been shaky, and you have an immobile Rodgers at 41 years old. He's only getting older, so I don't really know. I don't like this move at all. Nick, what do you think?
I definitely agree with that. And for Aaron Rodgers, obviously we saw it with the New York Jets. It definitely wasn't his best season. We saw a little bit of a nudge at the end of the season where he kind of pushed himself to try to finish the season on a better note, even though they didn't make the playoffs. And he finished great. He threw 4 touchdown passes in the Jets' final game of the year against the Miami Dolphins. But again, you have to look at it. You have to look at this. The man is 41 years old, and at this point, some players are retired. Some players retire years before this, but at this point, Rodgers has obviously declined in health and mobility and just the ability to be able to make plays happen like he did with the Green Bay Packers. And I just don't see how it would be if it didn't work out with the New York Jets. I just don't see how it's going to work with the New York Giants. Not that the Giants don't have a good franchise or anything, of course, but it's just the fact of like whether or not Rodgers will be able to fit in this kind of organization because of his age, and I just don't see how he would be able to fit in the system with the Giants.
No doubt. And the thing for Rodgers, at 41 years of age, you are not going anywhere to be a part of a rebuild. You want to go to a franchise that's in win-now mode, and the Giants are far from that. I think there's few situations where Rodgers can play well and thrive, because we saw it at the end of the season. He had some juice left. Hall of Famer, Jets former quarterback Joe Namath went out there and said, I think Rodgers has another year left in him. I agree, but for the right situation, to start off, Rodgers has to be right mentally. He has to want to go out there and play well, play with his teammates, and most likely mentor a quarterback, which is why I can see him with the Colts. And we can touch more about this next week because the Colts have weapons. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor, a bunch of guys. So it is going to be very interesting to see what happens in the state of the NFL. Nonetheless, that is going to do it here on the Sports Corner. I'm your host, Sebastian Stratton, joined alongside me, my awesome co-host, Nick Suppa, with the Kobe Bryant sweatshirt today. We all love Kobe.
Mamba for life.
So, we will be back here next week, 9 a.m. on the Sports Corner on 90.3 WMSC Upper Montclair. Have a great day, and we will see you next week. Go Red Hawks, and good luck to them this weekend.